as I said earlier, what did I say? Grain, I think it's the new redheaded stepchild of beer. The grain is the new redheaded stepchild of craft beer. Hops will always be craft beer. You see Amarillo, you see Simcoe, you think hoppy beers. It's pretty much, hops are a style of beer at this point. Like, you can tell Saaz, okay, that's probably going to be a Pilsner, Mexican Pilsner. Fugel, whatever, it's probably going to be a amber, British mild. Galaxy, Strato, you're going to think hoppy, you're going to think IPA. But I think that there's so many yeast companies now that people have kind of forgotten about grain. And I know the thing about grain is it is a very easy thing to learn. Like, when I first got into beer, I was very weirded out about everything. Victory malt, acid malt. Is there really acid in it? Maris Otter versus two-row. Two-row versus Pilsner malt. I used to think that they all came from the same plant, like these cereal plants. Barley. It's a plant, kind of. I don't have a botany major. But I used to think like there was an actual like chocolate barley that grew from the ground. I used to think there was like caramel malt that was in you could buy in Home Depot's outdoor. Grain is simple. Grain is super simple. You could obviously overthink anything, but when people talk about like every grain, okay, here we go. Every grain is pretty much two-row. There's six-row, but just think of like the stem and the actual flower. Two-row is like boom, 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 all the way up. Six-row is like boom, 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 six around. Six-row is bigger. They do use it in brewing. I've never used it, nor do I know why, but it's got way more proteins in it, and the more proteins you have in it, and that seed, it's going to have less fermentable sugars. But everything is pretty much two-row. Not everything, but everything at your homebrew store. I mean, aside from like flaked oats and stuff. Maris Otter, Pilsen malt, Victory malt, Caramel 60, Caramel 80, that's all two-row. It's all two-row. What makes it... there's no plant that grows these. It comes down to, we made a video on it. You roast the grains. Depending on how long and hot you roast these things, it changes that. And it changes the lava bonds. And I think like what's the lowest grain out there you could buy? Probably Pilsen malt. And then like one little step up from that, like when you talk about two-row, you talk about two-row pale malt, which is like, I don't know, one lava bond. High means dark, like espresso, midnight wheat grain. Low means like Pilsner malt, German Pilsner malt. So it's and there's so much more universal than you think. Grain bills are so much universal than you think. You can make so many different styles of beer with two-row pale malt. You can make so many different styles of beer with, Crystal, caramel. It's the same thing. Crystal and caramel are the same thing. I thought it was two completely different things like 3 years ago. But that's kind of what it comes down to is how, I mean, what's two-row? It comes from two-row barley. What's barley? Barley comes from grain. Is quinoa a grain? Can somebody make a quinoa beer? Acid malt. Acid malt. Acidulated malt. It's been subjected to lactic acid. Acid malt doesn't grow from the ground. I mean, naturally it's got a little bit, of acid in it, just like the same way it has proteins and shit. But, yeah, I was talking to my buddy this weekend and it like blew his mind. He's taking Mike's class over at Culver and he was like, whoa, like grain is like, it all comes from like two-row? I'm like, yeah, sort of. And then, depending how long they keep it pretty much from drying out at certain temperatures, if you got the big batches of grain, I think they do it in a kiln, K-I-L-N. I cannot really confirm that. Versus a roaster. I don't know what a roaster looks like, but I'd imagine it looks something like a coffee roaster You just when I roasted grains before, it takes a long time. All this shit you read on the internet, like 425 degrees, that's all bullshit. I tried that. It didn't work. I tried that a couple of years ago, and you burn the hell out of your grain. It's pretty much like, it's like sous vide. You got to keep it like, or a crock pot. You got to keep them roasted in your oven at like 180 degrees, the lowest it can go. Start with Pilsner malt or 2-row, and put it in for half an hour. Put it in for another half an hour. Now you have caramel 20. Put it in for another hour. Now you have caramel 40. Put it in for another hour. You have caramel 60. Do it all the way until you get up to chocolate malt or Carafa 3. You can do it as long as you cook it slow. That's what grain is. That's what 2-row grain is. Don't overthink it. Yada, 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 yada. Oh, here we go. Yes, gluten-free beers use quinoa sometimes. So let us know if anybody watches this tomorrow. This will probably upload and show up tomorrow. But don't overthink grain. Maris Otter, Pilsner malt, Pilsen, Pils, 2-row. It's all the same. And there's like lava bonds go from like, you're looking at like one lava bond Pilsner to like one more up is like 2-row pale. 2-row pale. And then like way up here is probably like caramel 80. And then like way up here is like, I don't know, 300 lava bond, chocolate malt stuff. So it's not all different plants. I used to think that. Lot simpler. That's a very homebrew for life way of saying it. I know you could read a book on it, but I'm not.